Donald Trump continues to argue against the validity of Michael Wolff's recent book, Fire and Fury, which was just released, early released actually. And in a recent tweet, he said that he authorized zero access to the White House, actually turned him down many times, for author of phony book. I never spoke to him for book, full of lies, misrepresentations, and sources that don't exist. Look at this guy's past and watch what happens to him and Sloppy Steve. All right, so Sloppy Steve was used again in this tweet, but it's unsurprising that he is calling into question the validity of Michael Wolff's book, even though Steve Bannon has not denied any of the statements that were leaked before the release of the book. And I do want to mention that there have been other members of the media that have criticized Michael Wolff's reporting in the past. Not that he reports false things, but that he might embellish things or use hyperbole to tell the stories, or maybe doesn't remember certain components of the stories exactly the way that they happened. But so far, based on what we know and what has been reported, no one has denied anything other than Donald Trump, which I think is a pretty telling sign. When you go to the White House, when you're a reporter, you go to the White House, and you don't have what's called a hard pass, where you're there every day and you're part of the White House, press corps every day, part of the pool. You get a temporary pass. So I will walk in, I'll show my passport, and they will give me my temporary pass that has already been, I've been pre-cleared, they've already gone through those motions. That temporary pass is gray. It gets me to the press room and not much more than that, to some of the offices within the press side. When you go and you get a blue pass, that means you have West Wing access. It's a West Wing pass. Zeke Miller of Time magazine and a few others have said that whenever they saw Michael Wolff at the White House, he had a blue pass. And you notice that when you're there every day, because it's like, that guy's got a blue pass. That's pretty cool. He can go into the West Wing. There is no disputing that Michael Wolff was at the White House, and Trump says he didn't give him access. It's his White House that issued that blue pass, and right. So the denying of what went on there is remarkable. So I want to go to Michael Wolff himself, because he had an interview with the Today Show. He gave them an exclusive interview, and he responds to these accusations that he didn't even have access to the West Wing. Let's take a look. Did you talk to the president? Did you interview him for this book? I absolutely spoke to the president. Whether he realized it was an interview or not, I don't know, but it certainly was not off the record. And you spoke to him at the White House after he was sworn in? I spoke to him after the inauguration, yes. And I had spoken to, I've spent about 3 hours with the president over the course of the campaign in the White House. So my window into Donald Trump is pretty significant. But even more to the point, and this was really sort of the point of the book, I spoke to people who spoke to the president on a daily, sometimes minute-by-minute basis. So this book was really, in a sense, there was one question on my mind when I began this book. What is it like to work with Donald Trump? How can you work with Donald Trump? And what is the, how do you feel having worked with Donald Trump?
So, let's talk about what you mentioned there, Anna, in the beginning, which is some people saying sometimes Michael Wolff embellishes stuff. He says he's never had, of the millions of words that he's written in books and in articles, had one fact that had to be corrected. And so I haven't checked every word he's ever written, but okay, that's a bold statement and likely proven false if it was false. So, and no one has said that it's false. So, okay, likely to be true. And we report that in an effort to be fair, right? But it's not, I don't want anybody walking away thinking 50-50. It ain't 50-50. Michael Wolff's a real reporter that's been around for decades, and Donald Trump is a notorious pathological liar who has every interest in the world to lie about this situation. Now, having said that, the Trump team says they once talked on the phone for 7 minutes, and Michael Wolff says, in total, in the campaign and in the White House, I've talked to him for about 3 hours. My guess is that particular thing, the quotes he can't make up. He'll be in massive trouble if he made up the quotes, and he's got audio tape of most of it or contemporaneous notes, etc. But my guess is on the number of times he actually spoke to Trump, it's probably somewhere in the middle. And I'm not doing both sides do it or trying to call it even. It's just that 3 hours on the campaign in the White House, kind of. What does 3 hours mean, right?
Cumulative is what he's saying.
Yeah.
And he's saying cumulatively. The White House can say he only spoke to him for 7 minutes because they keep a log of every minute of phone call he has. So it may not have been on the phone that they spoke every time, but there's a White House log that says 6 minutes and 48 seconds, Michael Wolff spoke with the president, right?
Right.
Michael Wolff could say, well, I saw him at Mar-a-Lago. I saw him on the campaign trail. I was in the White House. We passed by. I talked to him. Whatever.
That's exactly right. But I just want to explain. It's the least relevant part.
It is.
The question is, are the quotes right?
Right.
Are the facts right?
And I want to jump in on that point because I think that is the most relevant part of this. I don't care how long they spoke. I want to know whether or not these quotes are valid. And I believe they are valid because remember, Trump and his lawyers sent Michael Wolff and the publisher of his book the cease and desist letter threatening a lawsuit. And guess what they did? They released the book early. Okay, and I think the reason why they did that is because they're confident in the validity of the contents of that book. He would face significant, legal action if there was real defamation in there, if things were fabricated and made up. And in this next video, he talks about the evidence that he has, which I think is also valuable. Take a look.
Do you have recordings of some of these interviews and some of these conversations?
Well, I work like every journalist works, so I have recordings, I have notes. I am certainly absolutely in every way comfortable with everything I've reported in this book.
Would you release any of those recordings since your credibility is being questioned?
My credibility is being questioned by a man who has less credibility than perhaps anyone who has ever walked on earth at this point.
Look, in regards to that quote, it's funny, but he's absolutely right. In the sense that, I don't know that he's absolutely right about Trump being the very last person on earth you should trust, but he's in the ballpark. No, in terms of whose interest are we looking at here? Donald Trump has all the interest in the world to say that he doesn't have credibility. I mean, you should discount that completely. You should go, and by the way, when Michael Wolff says, I have all the credibility in the world, you should also discount that. You should go to neutral sources. Hey, what is the totality of Michael Wolff's career? What do other journalists say about him? Have people denied what he said in the book? Those are the things that you look at. Just saying, hey, he's questioned your credibility. Yeah, of course he questioned it. The guy buried him in the book, right? Yeah. He looks terrible. So, and when you look at those neutral sources and outside sources, first of all, it's amazing that no one has denied a single quote in the book outside of Trump.
Right.
That's amazing. And they work for Trump or worked for Trump. So that is overwhelming evidence. Point number two is, so they questioned this, one of the scenes and they most questioned the Trump team did because it involved Russia. It was at a dinner at Michael Wolff's house, and the late Roger Ailes, who used to run Fox News, and Steve Bannon were there. And Ailes says to Bannon, I don't know why he listens to Putin so much. I don't know who's jerking whose chain here. So that's really interesting for those guys to think that even before Trump took office, that was on January 3rd. And they're like, oh, that's not true. There's no way that's true because it's about Russia. Janice Min, who helps to run Hollywood Reporters, like, I was at the dinner. It was word for word. That's absolutely accurate.
So I wanted to jump in on another criticism that Wolff has faced, and I think that it's a valid criticism based on what you think about journalistic ethics, because Michael Wolff got the access that he got by being very kind and sucking up to Trump and members of his administration. And he would make these public displays of supporting Trump. So I'll give you one example. He was on Brian Stelter's show on CNN, Reliable Sources, and during a live interview that he had on that show, he kind of scolded Brian Stelter for being too critical of Trump. So he knows that Trump watches cable TV. He knows that Trump was gonna view that and see that Michael Wolff is kind of defending him there. I mean, he played a certain role in order to get the access that he wanted. Now, if that's unethical or not, I mean, it's really up to you. But it gave him what he needed in order to get some of this content for his book.
Yeah, I think you're being too critical to Michael Wolff.
But in all seriousness, though, 1 second on that. And you know that Michael Wolff didn't mean those compliments because he now says Donald Trump is the least credible person on earth.
Yeah.
So when he was defending him earlier, that was obviously BS. Just keeping it real.
But also one thing to know about Michael Wolff is that his career, a lot of his writing, it has been about social, wealthy New York. And Donald Trump, before he was your president, was part of social, wealthy New York to some degree. He was ostracized by a lot of people there, but he was the kind of shining, shiny ball that would be followed by Michael Wolff and his reporting as a reporter. So it goes to reason, it stands to reason that he's the kind of person who would know how to break into the mindset and of Donald Trump, and that's just really good journalism. The people who are criticizing it, I'm guessing, are jealous of it. One of the other things you should do is you should look back to criticism that Bob Woodward got when he wrote a book about the White House called, I think it was called Shadow or Shadows, and he quoted and he presumed and he talked about, well, then George H.W. Bush walked out onto the Truman balcony and thought so-and-so. Well, he never talked to Bush about that, but enough people in Bush's sphere said this is what the president did. He went outside. He thought, I need to go down to Khrushchev and say this, or Gorbachev and say this, or whatever. Not Khrushchev, but Gorbachev.
That's a nice combination, by the way, of Khrushchev
and I'm making this up because that's just one of the possibilities of what was said. But that's how reporting is done, too. You speak to the people around him, and to Cenk and Anna's point, nobody has refuted it, right? Yeah. Except the president. When any kind of book like this, these books that there's always one person who finds it scurrilous, the person about whom it is written, and whether it's a movie star, a rock star, or the Mr. Trump.
And one more thing about that. There's no way that the Trump team right now isn't calling every single person in the book going, go out on TV and refute it, go out on TV and refute it. And everybody's like, nope.
Yeah.
So that's, and Bannon has now become cucked, right? And so he went out there because he's on the precipice of losing his entire career and his funding and all of that. And he went on his Sirius show and said, oh, Trump is a great man. I talk about the Trump miracle all the time. But he didn't refute any of the quotes.
That's right, yeah.
And in fact, there's one guy now, Sam Nunberg, who we're gonna talk about later in the show, who's going around saying, yeah, I probably called him an idiot. In other words, yes, you did. If you like this video, bless your heart. We got a lot more where that came from. We do a full show every day, Monday through Friday. Come enjoy it ad-free by becoming a member, tytnetwork.com/join.